Welcome to Law 4D. This is probably one of the more formative settings for myself personally and basically everything I do artistically. As weird as that sounds, especially if you've been following and know my interest, it's true. While New Girl is nowhere near a perfect piece of television, nor is it anywhere near on the level of so many other shows in terms of pure quality, New Girl is one of the most important shows to me. And there's a reason for this. And the reason for this is very simple. New Girl understands one thing better than almost any other show that's tried to replicate Friends since, well, Friends. It's about character dynamics and how to write a genre, the buddy genre. And it's all encapsulated perfectly in one perfect episode. That's this one, right here. The setup is fairly simple. Winston is finally on his way to becoming a cop, but to finally reach that goal, well, Winnie has to have one of his chiefs come in and do an at-home interview. Basically a part of the background check process. It's a personality check to ensure that you are fit to be an officer of the law. Is this real? I don't know. Do real police officers go through this? I have to imagine not, but in here, it's what's happening. This kind of setup is called a lot of different things in television. I call it the time bomb setup, and essentially that's a setup for an episode of a sitcom that is clearly designed to explode after a certain period of time into, well, chaos. We find out what that chaos is very early. See, Jessica Day realizes that there is a police officer coming to their home and remembers, oh yeah, I have this bag here. What's in the bag? Well, Jessica believes that this here is crack, and she now has to find a way to get rid of this contraband before maybe ending up in prison or worse, ruining Winston's chances of being a cop. Now let's talk about why this setup works and how it works so well. If you've been following the show, it is serialized in nature, you know that Winston's path to finding something he actually wants to do, a career, has been seasons long. This is a huge deal. It's not like one day he woke up and said, I'm gonna be a cop, and it's just another couple episodes of the season. This is the thing for the first time that Winston really wants to do, and it's the first thing he feels he's capable of doing. Jess sees that passion and, well, doesn't want to ruin that. And we, the audience, don't want Winston's shot ruined either. So, setup grounded in character. Now let's move on to part 2, which is the genre itself. The buddy genre is a really interesting genre. Essentially, it's a genre of sitcom that revolves around what seems mundane in principle, but is more true to life in a sense. Here are a group of friends that are living their lives. They don't all work in the same office necessarily. They don't have crazy jobs. They don't work for the Parks and Rec department or at 30 Rock. They just live together or near each other and hang out a lot. That's it. Examples of this, How I Met Your Mother, Friends, obviously. And what's important about this genre is that the characters are everything here. There's no underlying setup, there's no mystery, there's nothing driving narrative outside of relationships. It is the sitcom version of a soap opera, essentially. Now, to be clear, I don't mean in terms of drama, I mean in terms of the foundational principle simply being the people on your screen. So, you have to write your characters the right way. And each and every one of them need to be distinct, and that is where New Girl absolutely nails its writing. Let's go through this episode and talk about what each of these people are doing and how each of these people are staying true to their character in the process of one incredibly chaotic 22-minute series of events. Winston is very nervous. This is in Winston's nature. He's very obtuse socially, and you see that throughout the episode. He doesn't understand why people are acting weird. We see him miss social cues, and we see him not understand the social situation he's in almost every second of the episode. Now, what do we know about Nick Miller before this? Well, we know Nick's a bad liar. We know he wants to be a writer, and we know he's terrified of the law and does not trust the government. So what does Nick do throughout this episode? Well, here we see Nick become an absolutely terrible liar. We see him fail to do the one thing that he's supposed to be good at, which is construct a story, and we see Sweatback return here. Everything about Nick Miller comes together in this episode. Schmidt, flamboyancy, manipulative, and pretentious. You're going to get absolutely all of that here. Jess, Cece, the point here, without belaboring it, is that each of these characters have had seasons to grow and become people that the audience recognizes. What makes this episode so great and what makes the show so great is that for the most part, they never abandon those personalities. In this episode, we get an opportunity, like Good Time Bob episodes create, to see through the facade and into the characters that we know underneath. There's no pretense here. Everything we know about Nick Miller is here in this episode. Everything we know about Schmidt, Cece, everything we know about Winston, it's all here, which is not only what makes buddy genre shows so interesting, but it's also what makes Time Bomb episodes so great. We see our characters put on acts until their true selves reveal themselves through some external force, in this case, the background check. But to hone in on the fourth factor of this episode, the thing that makes it so great, on top of those things we've already discussed, we have to kind of look back at what it means to serialize character. Now, this is something so many shows get wrong. What does serialization mean? It simply means that episode to episode, season to season, the story continues. They aren't bottle episodes like you might get from a Drake and Josh. Serializing character is very difficult. Not only does it require you to remain consistent, but it requires you to get it right relatively immediately so that you don't create this ever-revolving personality. Now, New Girl wasn't always the poster child for this. In fact, I would say it was the opposite. Winston is a great example. The original version of Winston Bishop is the straight man. He was the guy in the loft that was more grounded, that wasn't always in on the joke. He wasn't missing it. He just didn't care. He was the mature one. He wasn't the shenanigans guy. What the writers eventually realized relatively quickly is that this straight man routine wasn't working. It was making Winston a character that stood out instead of fitting in, which in the case of the buddy genre is pertinent. So they slowly rewrote Winston into this guy, this socially awkward, hyperactive, cat-loving prankster who goes from being the most mature member of the group at the beginning of the show to by far the zaniest and least grounded character just a few seasons later. Now, this change was for the better, but the point is that when you serialize character, you have to get it right. And that is what makes this episode work, and it has nothing to do with the episode itself. The chaos of this episode works because we know how these characters are going to respond. So there's not a level of suspense. We're not worried they're gonna go to jail or prison. We're just excited to see them be themselves. And it's the minutia and the nuance in that makes us laugh. That's funny. Not necessarily character unpredictability, which is what writers get wrong a lot on TV, which is that characters always need to defy expectations, but sometimes there's comfort in not doing so, especially in comedy. Now, that can't always be the case, otherwise you'd make a lazy show that doesn't surprise anybody, but there should be consistency. And finally, what I think New Girl gets right so often, while still working within the confines of the genre, is landing the joke. The gang spends the entire episode trying to get rid of these rocks. They try to put them down the shower, Jess stuffs them in her shirt. They try everything they can. Slowly, one by one, each member of the group realizes that there is a giant felony-sized bag of narcotics in the apartment, and we get the joke of each individual reaction. Now, we still think that Jess has really found a bag of narcotics, and it isn't until the end of the episode where the joke gets landed. And that is also what's so great in sitcoms about Time Bomb episodes, is that usually your conceit is also the primary joke. Here, bag of drugs. How do we land the joke? Well, that's right. That bag was simply aquarium rocks. And not a single member of the gang realized that. More importantly, Jess even believed that she was high from contact. We get a little bit of character growth out of all this comedy from Winston. We get the key to the buddy genre, everybody coming together and trying to land on the same sword for each other. We find out Winston is going to be a cop and everybody lives happily ever after. But what's important is that narcotics become the joke and New Girl lands the joke. All this is to say that New Girl was one of the better buddy genre shows to ever exist, at least in my opinion. Now, I think New Girl is a phenomenal TV show from a qualitative perspective. Is it going to blow your mind in terms of its writing, plot development, narrative, directing? Absolutely not. It's not attempting to do any of those things, and it certainly doesn't accomplish any of those things. New Girl is what I sometimes call a comfort show. It doesn't test my mind, but it feels like home, which is all the buddy genre is trying to accomplish. And that's what I think is worth recognizing here. This genre is very, very difficult. It requires you to not only find excuses to put normal people in abnormal situations, but it also requires you to write people that other people will care about. And that is the biggest hurdle in screenwriting. Character. Anybody can think up a wacky idea. Anybody can think up a new kind of alien invasion or a new shipwrecked shark movie. But can you write people that make people care about people? That's what matters. At the end of the day, human beings just want to relate to other human beings, just like they want to relate to art. So, if you decide to sit down and write in this very small, tiny buddy genre, the only piece of advice I can give is just make sure your Jessica Day will go to prison for your Winston Bishop over some aquarium rocks. Well guys, that's it for today's episode of Nerdstalgic. If you enjoyed this one, press the like button down below. If you haven't yet done so, also hit subscribe. And hopefully I will see you guys in the next video.